What happens when two teens on their first solo flight face a battle for their dignity at 30,000 feet? Meet Emma and Ethan Hayes, 17-year-old twins from Chicago, whose journey in the first-class cabin of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner turns into a fight against discrimination and entitlement. With their seats and their pride under attack, they'll uncover the true meaning of courage, sparking a movement that reshapes justice in the skies. This isn't just a flight. It's a lesson in standing tall against all odds. Will they triumph? Stick around to find out, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that inspire. What if your first taste of freedom came with a lesson that could change the world? Inside the plush first-class cabin of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner, Emma and Ethan Hayes, 17-year-old twins from Chicago, Illinois, were about to find out. The soft hum of the engines vibrated beneath their feet as they settled into seats 1A and 1B, the best in the house, a gift from their father, David Hayes, the powerhouse CEO of TechVision, a leading tech firm shaking up the industry. For Emma and Ethan, this wasn't just a flight to San Francisco, it was a milestone, their first journey alone, a chance to prove they could stand tall without their dad's shadow guiding their every step. Emma, with her sharp eyes and quiet confidence, adjusted her scarf and glanced at her brother. Ethan, always the dreamer, leaned back in the buttery leather seat, his gaze fixed on the endless stretch of clouds outside the window, a golden glow painting the sky as the sun dipped low. "Can you believe this, Em?" he whispered, a grin tugging at his lips, his voice a mix of awe and nerves. "We're really doing this on our own." Emma smiled, her fingers brushing the edge of a small journal their dad had given them before they left, its pages filled with his handwritten advice about independence and self-respect. "I think we're ready, Ethan," she replied softly, though a flicker of uncertainty danced in her chest. "Dad trusts us. We've got to show him he's right." David had planned this trip with purpose. He wanted his kids to learn what it meant to navigate the world with dignity, to face real-life challenges without him swooping in to fix things. As the flight attendant approached with a warm smile, offering them sparkling apple juice in crystal glasses, Emma felt a swell of pride, and Ethan were being treated like adults, a rare thrill that made her sit a little straighter. Ethan raised his glass to hers, the clink echoing like a promise. "To making Dad proud," he toasted, his eyes sparkling with determination. In that moment, the cabin felt like a cocoon of possibility, wrapping them in the warmth of their shared dreams. Little did they know, the skies ahead held a storm they'd never imagined, one that would test their courage, their hearts, and the very lessons their father hoped they'd learn. The golden glow of the sunset had just begun to fade through the window of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner when a sharp chill cut through the warm air of the first-class cabin. Emma Hayes, still clutching the journal her dad had given her, felt a prickle of unease as the sound of confident heels clicked down the aisle. Ethan, who had been sipping his sparkling apple juice, froze mid-sip, his eyes narrowing as a shadow loomed over their seats. Linda Brooks, a middle-aged white woman draped in a tailored navy blazer, stood before them, her icy blue eyes scanning seats 1A and 1B with a look of entitled disdain. She was no stranger to Skyline Airways, a Platinum Elite member, known for her sharp tongue and unrelenting demands, the kind of passenger who expected the world to bend to her whims. "There must be some mistake," Linda snapped, her voice slicing through the cabin's calm like a knife, loud enough for nearby passengers to turn their heads. "These seats 1A and 1B are mine. They've been mine for years." Her gaze locked onto Emma and Ethan, her lips curling into a sneer as she added, "I don't know who let you kids sit here, but you don't belong in first class." The words hit Emma like a slap, her heart sinking as the warmth of their milestone moment evaporated. Ethan set his glass down, his jaw tightening, but he kept his voice steady. "Ma'am, these seats were booked for us by our dad. We have the tickets to prove it," he said, his tone polite but firm, echoing the self-respect their father had instilled in them. Linda's eyes flashed with fury, her hands planting on her hips as she leaned closer, her perfume sharp and suffocating. "I don't care who your dad is," she hissed, her voice dripping with condescension. "I've spent more on this airline than you could ever dream of. First class isn't a playground for kids, especially not for ones like you." The thinly veiled racism, in her words, stung Ethan's chest, a quiet anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Emma's fingers tightened around her journal, her heart pounding with a mix of hurt and defiance. Around them, the cabin grew tense, the air heavy with unspoken judgment as passengers whispered and watched. What had started as a journey of independence was now a battle for dignity, and Emma and Ethan were determined not to back down. The tension in the first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner thickened like a storm cloud ready to burst, the air heavy with the bitter sting of Linda Brooks's words. Emma Hayes sat rigid in seat 1A, her fingers still gripping the journal her dad had given her, its leather cover now warm from her tightening hold. Beside her, Ethan kept his eyes fixed on Linda, his calm exterior, a thin mask over the fury bubbling in his chest. Linda's accusation, first class isn't a playground for kids especially, not for ones like you, echoed in their ears, a cruel jab at their age and their black identity. The hurt sliced deep, but it was the defiance in Emma's heart that kept her from shrinking back. She glanced at Ethan, her twin's steady presence, a silent reminder of their shared strength, the bond that had carried them through every challenge since they were kids. Linda, however, was far from done. Her icy blue eyes narrowed as she crossed her arms, her navy blazer creasing with the sharpness of her stance. "I've been flying with Skyline Airways for over a decade," she declared, her voice rising to ensure every passenger could hear. "I've earned my place here. I don't care what your little tickets say, I'm not sitting anywhere else." Her tone dripped with entitlement, each word a hammer meant to crush the dignity of the two 17-year-olds before her. Emma's stomach churned with a mix of anger and disbelief. How could someone be so blind to fairness, so wrapped up in privilege, that they'd trample over others without a second thought? Ethan's hand brushed against hers under the armrest, a subtle gesture that said, "We've got this." But the weight of the moment pressed down on them, the once warm cabin now feeling like a battlefield where their self-respect was the prize. A young flight attendant named Sarah, her sleek uniform slightly wrinkled from the mounting stress, approached cautiously, her clipboard trembling in her hands. "Miss Brooks," she began, her voice soft but unsteady, "I've checked the system, and seats 1A and 1B are indeed reserved for Emma and Ethan Hayes. The booking was confirmed 2 weeks ago." Her words were meant to diffuse the situation, but they only fueled Linda's rage. "I don't care what your system says." Linda snapped, her face flushing red as she jabbed a manicured finger towards Sarah. "I'm a Platinum Elite member. Do you have any how much I've spent with this airline? I deserve those seats. Not these kids." The word kids came out like a slur, laced with disdain that made Emma's throat tighten. She wanted to scream, to tell Linda that they weren't just kids, they were human beings with every right to be there, but she bit her lip, remembering her dad's advice. Stay calm, but never let anyone walk over you. The situation escalated when Lisa, the flight supervisor, stepped in. A woman in her late 40s with a tight blonde bun and a forced smile, Lisa exuded the kind of authority that came from years of handling difficult passengers. But instead of standing up for what was right, she chose the path of least resistance. "Let's all take a deep breath," Lisa said, her tone overly calm, as if she were soothing a toddler. She turned to Emma and Ethan, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I understand these seats are important to you, but sometimes we need to be a little flexible, especially when a longtime passenger like Miss Brooks is upset. We can't delay the flight over this." Emma's heart sank further, a cold wave of betrayal washing over her. Flexible? These seats were theirs legally, rightfully theirs. How could flexibility mean surrendering to injustice? Ethan's voice cut through the silence, steady but sharp. "With all due respect, ma'am, we're not the ones causing a delay. We're sitting in our seats, the ones our dad booked for us. If Miss Brooks has a problem, shouldn't she take it up with the airline instead of us?" His words were a quiet challenge, rooted in the self-respect David Hayes had taught them to hold dear. Lisa's smile faltered, her eyes flickering with discomfort, but she didn't back down. "I hear you," she said, "but let's find a solution that works for everyone. There are other seats in first class you can move to." Suggestion felt like a punch to Ethan's gut. Move? Why should they have to give up what was theirs just to appease someone else's arrogance? Linda seized the moment, her voice now a sneer. "See? Even the crew knows you don't belong here. First class is for people who've earned it, not for spoiled brats who think they can buy their way in. Her words were a dagger, each one aimed at their pride, their identity, their very existence in that space. Emma's eyes stung with unshed tears, not from weakness, but from the sheer weight of the unfairness pressing down on them. She looked around, hoping for support, but most passengers averted their gazes, pretending to adjust their earbuds or flip through magazines. The silence from those around them felt louder than Linda's insults, a painful reminder of how often people choose to stay quiet in the face of wrong. Just then, a middle-aged man in a gray suit, seated a few rows back, spoke up, his voice calm but firm. "I've flown with Skyline for years, and I know how bookings work. If their tickets are confirmed, they have every right to stay. Miss Brooks, you should take the seat you were assigned." His words were a lifeline, a small spark of hope in the suffocating tension. But Linda shot him a glare that could have frozen fire. "Mind your own business," she hissed before turning back to Lisa. "I want this handled now." Emma and Ethan exchanged a glance, their twin bond stronger than ever in that moment of isolation. They weren't just fighting for their seats anymore, they were fighting for their dignity, for the right to be seen as equals, no matter their age or skin color. The storm in the cabin was far from over, and the lessons their father hoped they'd learn were about to be tested in ways they never imagined. If you're feeling the heat of this moment, let us know in the comments what would you do if you were in Emma and Ethan's shoes. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for the next part of this gripping story. We've got more powerful moments coming your way, and you won't want to miss how this battle for justice unfolds. The first-class cabin of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner had become a pressure cooker, the air so thick with tension that Emma Hayes could barely breathe. Her heart pounded as Linda Brooks' venomous words, "First class is for people who've earned it, not for spoiled brats," still rang in her ears, each syllable a fresh wound to her pride. Beside her, Ethan's calm facade was cracking, his hands clenched into fists on his lap, his brown eyes burning with a quiet fury that mirrored her own. The betrayal from the flight crew, Lisa and Sarah, who had pressured them to be flexible and give up their rightful seats, left a bitter taste in Emma's mouth. She felt trapped, her dignity under siege, but the lessons her father, David Hayes, had instilled in them, stand tall, never let anyone diminish your worth, kept her anchored. They weren't moving, not an inch. Ethan, sensing the weight of the moment, leaned toward Emma, his voice a whisper meant only for her. "We can't let her win, Em. Dad would want us to fight for what's right." Emma nodded, her throat tight with emotion, her fingers brushing the journal in her lap as if it held the strength she needed. But the suffocating silence of the cabin, broken only by Linda's smug demands and the crew's complicity, made her feel more alone than ever. That was until Ethan pulled out his phone, his hands steady despite the storm raging inside him. "I'm calling Dad," he said, his tone resolute. Emma's eyes widened, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. She knew their father wasn't just a CEO, he was a force of nature, a man who commanded respect not through fear, but through unwavering integrity. On the 60th floor of TechVision's headquarters in Chicago, David Hayes stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, the city skyline sprawling beneath him like a map of his hard-earned success. He was in the middle of a high-stakes meeting, negotiating a $1.5 billion deal with European investors, when his phone buzzed with Ethan's name on the screen. Without hesitation, he raised a hand to pause the room, his deep voice cutting through the chatter. "I need to take this. Family emergency." The investors exchanged glances, but said nothing when David Hayes spoke. People listened. He stepped into his private office, the door clicking shut behind him, and answered the call. "Ethan, what's wrong?" His tone was calm but laced with a protective edge that only a father could muster. "Dad, it's me and Emma," Ethan began, his voice low but steady, recounting the ordeal with Linda Brooks and the crew's failure to protect their rights. "She's demanding our seats, 1A and 1 saying they're hers, and the flight supervisor is siding with her. They're trying to make us move, even though you booked these seats for us." David's grip on the phone tightened, his jaw setting as Ethan's words painted a picture of injustice that struck at the core of everything he taught his children. Emma's voice chimed in, soft but firm. "We didn't do anything wrong, Dad, but they're making us feel like we don't belong here." The hurt in her tone was a dagger to David's heart, but it was her strength that made him proud she wasn't backing down. David's response was immediate, his voice a steel blade wrapped in velvet. You two did nothing wrong. Those seats are yours, and no one has the right to take them. Stay where you are. I'll handle this. He hung up, his mind already racing with the precision of a man who'd built an empire on fairness and accountability. He dialed James Carter, the CEO of Skyline Airways, a man he'd shared drinks with at industry galas, a man who'd promised TechVision's clients would always be treated with dignity. When James answered, David didn't waste a second. My kids, Emma and Ethan, are on your flight 492 to San Francisco, seats 1A and 1B. A passenger named Linda Brooks is harassing them, and your crew is complicit. I need this fixed now. James, sensing the gravity in David's voice, assured him immediate action, dispatching 2 senior representatives to the plane. Back on the flight, the cabin door opened unexpectedly, a rare occurrence so close to takeoff. 2 men in crisp black suits entered, their Skyline badges gleaming with authority. Robert Miller, a graying executive with a no-nonsense demeanor, led the way, followed by Tom Clark, a younger man with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Robert's voice cut through the tension like a gavel. I'm Robert Miller, and this is Tom Clark. We're here on direct orders from CEO James Carter. Why are 2 passengers with confirmed tickets being asked to vacate their seats? Lisa, the flight supervisor, stammered, her forced smile crumbling. I was trying to avoid a delay, sir. Miss Brooks is a Platinum Elite member, and... Robert interrupted, his tone icy. I'm not asking about Miss Brooks' status. I'm asking why you failed to protect these passengers' rights. Linda stepped forward, her voice now a calculated whine. This is ridiculous. I always sit in 1A. These kids shouldn't even be here. But Robert's gaze silenced her. Tradition doesn't override a contract, Miss Brooks. And if you think age or race gives you the right to take someone's seat, you're gravely mistaken. He turned to Lisa and Sarah, his judgment swift. You're both suspended, effective immediately, for violating passenger rights and professional ethics. The cabin buzzed with whispers as Lisa's face drained of color, her badge trembling in her hands. Sarah looked away, guilt etching her features. Linda's composure shattered. You can't do this to me, she screeched. But Robert was unmoved. Your Platinum Elite status is revoked permanently for misconduct and discrimination. The words hit Linda like a thunderclap, her world of privilege crumbling before her eyes. When she continued to protest, Captain Mark Sanders emerged from the cockpit, his presence commanding, Miss Brooks, if you disrupt this flight further, I'll have you removed. Safety and order come first. Linda's defiance crumbled under his authority, and security escorted her off the plane, her screams fading as the door closed with a final thud. Emma and Ethan sat still, their hands intertwined, a wave of relief washing over them. Emma's eyes glistened with unshed tear-snot of sadness, but of pride. We did it, Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. We stood up for ourselves. Ethan nodded, a small smile breaking through his exhaustion. And Dad made sure justice was served. The cabin lights softened, the hum of the engines signaling takeoff. For the first time since Linda's arrival, they felt safe, their dignity restored not by their father's power, but by their own unwavering resolve. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner finally lifted off the tarmac, its engines roaring with a steady hum that seemed to echo the newfound calm in the first-class cabin. Emma Hayes sat in seat 1A, her hands no longer clenched but resting gently on the journal her dad had given her, its pages a quiet reminder of the lessons that had carried her through the storm. Beside her, Ethan gazed out the window, the San Francisco-bound sky now a deep indigo streaked with the last traces of sunset. The oppressive tension that had gripped the cabin fueled by Linda Brooks' entitlement and the crew's complicity had dissipated like a bad dream, replaced by a lightness that felt almost sacred. For Emma, the relief was palpable. But it wasn't triumph she felt. It was something deeper, a quiet pride that bloomed in her chest as she realized what they'd accomplished, not just keeping their seats, but standing up for their dignity in a world that too often tried to diminish it. As the plane leveled off, Robert Miller, the senior Skyline Airways executive who'd stepped in to right the wrong, approached Emma and Ethan. His stern demeanor softened, his eyes carrying a glint of respect that hadn't been there before. He knelt slightly to meet their gaze, his voice low but earnest. Emma, Ethan, he began, on behalf of Skyline Airways, I want to offer you our deepest apologies. What you experienced today, discrimination, unfair treatment, goes against everything we stand for. You deserve better, and I promise you, this will never happen again. Emma felt a lump rise in her throat, not from sadness, but from the weight of his words. She glanced at Ethan, whose small nod gave her the courage to speak. Thank you, sir, she said, her voice steady, despite the emotions swirling inside her. But the most important thing isn't that we got an apology. It's that no one else has to go through what we did today. No one should feel like they don't belong because of their age or their skin color. Her words hung in the air, a declaration that seemed to ripple through the cabin. Nearby passengers, who had once stayed silent, now leaned in, their expressions a mix of admiration and reflection. A woman in a silk scarf, seated a few rows back, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, clearly moved by Emma's maturity. Ethan squeezed his sister's hand under the armrest, a silent "I'm proud of you" that needed no words. For Emma, this moment was a revelation. She'd always known she and Ethan were strong together, but today, she'd learned just how powerful their voices could be when they refused to be silenced. The hurt she'd felt Linda's cruel words, the crew's betrayal, had transformed into a fire that fueled her resolve. She wasn't just a 17-year-old girl on a plane anymore. She was a young woman who'd faced injustice head-on and come out stronger on the other side. The impact of their stand didn't stop at the cabin door. 3 days after the flight landed in San Francisco, Skyline Airways posted a bold announcement on their website, a statement that Emma would later read with a swell of quiet satisfaction. Under the headline, "A New Commitment to Justice and Equality," the airline acknowledged the incident on Flight 492, admitting their failure to protect two young passengers from discrimination. They outlined a sweeping new initiative: mandatory training for all staff on cultural sensitivity and conflict resolution, a dedicated passenger ethics department to handle complaints of unfair treatment, and the inclusion of Emma and Ethan's story as a case study in their training materials. The announcement ended with a promise from the CEO: "We will stand on the side of what's right, no matter who speaks the truth, even if it comes from a child." Emma read those words on her phone, sitting cross-legged on her hotel bed, and felt a tear slip down her cheek. It wasn't just validation, it was proof that their courage had sparked real change. Back in the cabin, as the flight attendants moved through the aisles with renewed professionalism, Emma turned to Ethan, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "I never thought we'd make such a big difference," she admitted, her brown eyes shining with a mix of awe and gratitude. "I was so scared, Ethan scared, that we'd lose, that no one would care. But we didn't give up. And now I feel like we've given a voice to everyone who's ever felt overlooked." Ethan smiled, his expression softer than she'd seen in hours. "You were amazing, Em," he said, his voice warm with pride. "We showed them that dignity isn't something you can buy or take away. It's something you fight for." As the plane soared through the night sky, Emma leaned her head against the window, the cool glass a contrast to the warmth in her heart. She thought about her dad, David Hayes, and the lessons he'd taught them, lessons that had been tested in the fire of this journey. She realized that this flight wasn't just their first step into independence, it was their first step into a world where they could make a difference, not by shouting, but by standing firm. The stars outside twinkled like tiny beacons of hope, and Emma felt a peace she hadn't known she needed. They hadn't just won a battle for their seats, they'd won a battle for justice, for equality, for the right to be seen and respected. And in that victory, Emma found a new piece of herself, a piece that would guide her for the rest of her life. The San Francisco skyline glittered like a constellation of hope as the Boeing 787 Dreamliner touched down, its wheels kissing the runway with a gentle thud that marked the end of a journey unlike any other. Emma Hayes stepped off the plane, her hand still clutching the journal her father had given her, its worn edges now a testament to the emotional odyssey she and her twin brother Ethan had endured. The first-class cabin, once a battleground of injustice, now felt like a distant memory, its tension replaced by a quiet strength that pulsed through her veins. Ethan walked beside her, his shoulders relaxed for the first time since Linda Brooks' venomous outburst, his smile a mirror of the relief they both felt. But as they made their way through the terminal, Emma knew this wasn't just the end of a flight, it was the beginning of something bigger, a ripple that would stretch far beyond the walls of that plane. Back in Chicago, the story of Flight 492 exploded across the media landscape like wildfire. The Chicago Tribune ran a front-page feature titled, "Teen Twins Turn Turbulence into Triumph," detailing how Emma and Ethan Hayes, two 17-year-olds from the Windy City, had faced discrimination head-on and sparked a corporate reckoning. The article painted a vivid picture. Linda Brooks, the entitled Platinum Elite passenger, stripped of her privileges. Lisa and Sarah, the complicit crew members, suspended for their failure to uphold justice. And Skyline Airways, issuing a public apology and a bold new policy to combat unfair treatment. News outlets like CNN and NBC picked up the story, their anchors marveling at the poise of the young siblings who refused to back down. Social media buzzed with hashtags like number Justice on Flight 492 and number Stand Tall Hayes, with thousands of users sharing their own stories of standing up against discrimination. Emma scrolled through her phone in their hotel room, her heart swelling with a mix of awe and humility as she read comments from strangers who called her and Ethan heroes of a new generation. The impact didn't stop with headlines. At Tech Vision's headquarters, David Hayes watched the news with a proud smile, his chest tight with emotion. He'd raised his children to value dignity over wealth, and seeing them embody that lesson on a national stage filled him with a father's joy. But for Emma, the real victory wasn't in the spotlight, it was in the quiet moments of reflection that followed. One evening, back home in their Chicago suburb, she and Ethan sat on the back porch, the summer air warm against their skin as fireflies danced in the yard. The journal lay open between them, its pages filled with notes she'd scribbled during the flight, thoughts of fear, defiance, and ultimately, strength. "I keep replaying it in my head," Emma said, her voice soft but steady. "The way Linda looked at us, like we didn't belong. The way the crew turned away. I was so angry, Ethan, but also scared that no one would care." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the stars above. "I felt it too," he admitted, his tone reflective. "But when I called Dad, and then when those executives stepped in, I realized something. It's not just about us. It's about everyone who's ever been told they don't deserve a seat at the table because of their age, their race, their background. We showed them they can fight back." Emma nodded, a tear glistening in her eye. Not from sadness, but from the weight of that truth. She thought about the passengers who'd stayed silent, the woman who'd dabbed her eyes with a tissue, the man in the gray suit who'd spoken up. Their story had given others permission to feel, to act, to believe in change. "I used to think dignity was something you inherit," she mused, her fingers tracing the journal's cover. "But it's not. It's something you earn every time you stand up, even when you're shaking inside." The lessons from that flight wove themselves into the fabric of their lives. At school, Emma joined a diversity club, her voice rising during discussions about equity with a confidence she hadn't known she possessed. Ethan started volunteering with a local youth mentorship program, sharing their story to inspire kids to stand tall against bullying. Skyline Airways invited them to speak at a company-wide training session where Emma stood before hundreds of employees, her heart pounding but her words clear. "You don't need a first-class ticket to deserve respect," she told them, her gaze steady. "You just need the courage to demand it." The room erupted in applause, a sound that echoed the validation she'd felt on the plane, but this time it was for a cause greater than herself. The broader impact was undeniable. Skyline's new policies led to a 30% increase in customer satisfaction ratings within 6 months, according to industry reports, with other airlines following suit by adopting similar training programs. Advocacy groups cited the Hayes twins as a catalyst for renewed conversations about racial equity in travel. Their story featured in a documentary titled Flight to Justice, which premiered at a Chicago Film Festival to a standing ovation. Emma watched the screening, her hand in Ethan's, her heart swelling with pride as she saw their faces on the big screen not as victims, but as agents of change. The film ended with her own words from the porch that night. "Dignity isn't about a first-class seat. It's about standing tall when you're disrespected." Those words became a rallying cry, printed on posters, shared in classrooms, and whispered in boardrooms across the country. As months turned into a year, Emma sat on that same porch one autumn evening, the air crisp with the scent of falling leaves. She opened the journal again, flipping to a new page where she'd written her final reflection. This journey taught me that one voice, even a shaky one, can start a movement. It taught me that justice isn't just a word, it's a fight worth having. Ethan joined her, handing her a cup of hot cocoa, his smile warm and familiar. "You think we changed anything for real?" he asked, his tone playful but curious. Emma sipped the cocoa, the warmth spreading through her, and looked out at the fireflies still dancing in the yard. "I think we did," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "And if we can, so can anyone." Their story became a beacon, a reminder that courage could reshape systems and hearts. For Emma, it was a personal victory, proof that the lessons her dad had taught her were not just ideals, but tools to build a better world. For Ethan, it was a bond strengthened, a twinship forged in the fire of adversity. Together, they turned a moment of humiliation into a legacy of hope, proving that dignity wasn't a gift bestowed by others, but a right claimed with every step forward. The stars above seemed to wink in agreement, their light a silent promise that the fight for justice would continue, carried on the wings of those brave enough to stand tall. As the final chapter of Emma and Ethan's incredible journey unfolds, we're left with a truth that resonates deep within us all. Dignity isn't measured by the seat you hold, but by the courage you show when the world tries to push you down. Through their unwavering resolve, these young heroes transformed a single flight into a movement, reminding us that every voice, especially the quiet ones, holds the power to ignite change. Feel the pride swelling in your chest, the inspiration stirring in your soul, as you witness the value of standing up for what's right. Emma's journey teaches us that justice is personal, a fight she carried with every heartbeat, every tear, every defiant word, and it's a fight we can all join. Let this story be your call to action, a spark to fuel your own battles for fairness and respect. If this tale of triumph touched your heart, hit that like button to show your support. Share your thoughts in the comment show. Would you stand tall in their shoes? And don't miss out on more inspiring stories like this. Subscribe to our YouTube channel now to follow our journey of courage, resilience, and hope. Together, let's keep the conversation alive and the movement growing.